Vivienne Ashford did not wait for people. That was the first thing anyone learned about her. She did not wait for tables, for traffic, for answers, or for the slower parts of life that other people seemed to accept without complaint. She moved through the world as though it had been designed for her convenience, and so far, the world had mostly agreed. So when her Porsche Cayenne made a sound, a low, grinding moan that rose from somewhere beneath the hood and refused to stop, she did not pull over calmly. She gripped the wheel, exhaled through her nose, and turned into the first garage she saw, not because she trusted it, because it was there. The sign above the entrance read Dahlon's Auto and Tire. Hand-painted letters on a wooden board, slightly uneven, sun-bleached at the edges. The parking lot was cracked asphalt with a strip of weeds growing up the middle. There was a rusted red toolbox on a workbench near the open bay door, and beside it, a child's lunchbox with a unicorn painted on the lid. Vivienne parked. She did not get out immediately. She looked at the garage the way a person looks at a restaurant with no online reviews and decides, before stepping inside, that they have already been disappointed. She got out anyway. The man who came toward her wiped his hands on a cloth that had given up on being clean a long time ago. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of hands that had clearly known hard work for years. His face was calm. Not the calm of someone performing patience, the calm of someone who had simply decided, a long time ago, that most things were not worth rushing toward. "Morning," he said. "What can I do for you?" Vivienne was already looking at her phone. "There's a sound, grinding, started about 20 minutes ago. I need it looked at and I need to be out of here in 30 minutes. The man crouched beside the front wheel. He listened. He stood back up. "Could be the brake pad. Could be something in the rotor. I'll need to get it up on the lift." "How long?" 90 minutes, maybe less if it's straightforward." Vivienne looked up from her phone for the first time. "That's not going to work. I have a lunch reservation." He looked at her without any particular expression. "I understand that. But I can't rush a brake inspection. That's not something I'm willing to cut corners on." "Is there someone faster here?" "There's just me." She looked around the garage, the cracked lot, the hand-painted sign, the unicorn lunchbox. "Fine," she said, not warmly, not gratefully, the way someone says fine when they mean the opposite. She stepped back toward the waiting area, which was not really a waiting area. It was a plastic chair near the office door, beside a water cooler that hummed loudly. She took a photo of the garage, the cracked asphalt, the uneven sign, the general atmosphere of a place that had never been designed with aesthetics in mind. She opened her phone's camera, framed the shot carefully, and typed a caption beneath it. "Apparently this is what counts as professional service in some zip codes. Wish me luck, everyone." She posted it and slid her phone into her bag. 47 people liked it before her coffee got cold. Inside the bay, the mechanic, his name was Ray Dahlon, and this was his garage and had been for 9 years, kept working. He did not check social media during jobs. He did not have time for it. He had a brake pad to assess, a rotor to inspect, a customer waiting, and somewhere in the back office, his daughter doing her homework. His daughter was 7 years old. Her name was Macy. She had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness, and a habit of singing quietly to herself when she worked, which she did even when she was only doing second-grade math. She heard the customer's voice through the thin office wall. She heard the impatience in it, the sharpness, the sense that time spent waiting was time personally stolen. She finished her worksheet. She got up. She poured a paper cup of water from the cooler in the hall. She walked out to the waiting area and held it out to Vivienne. "You can sit in my chair if you want," Macy said. She was pointing to the chair she had dragged out from the back room, slightly larger than the plastic one by the door, with a purple cushion on it. Vivienne looked at the cup. She looked at the girl. She took the water. She did not sit in the chair. Macy went back inside without saying anything else. She picked up her pencil and kept working. Ray finished the inspection in 81 minutes. It was the brake pad, as he suspected, and he replaced it. He brought the car down from the lift, wiped his hands, and walked to where Vivienne was standing. "All done," he said. "Brake pad on the front left. It was worn almost through. Another few weeks and you'd have had real trouble." Vivienne looked at the bill he handed her. She paid without looking at him. She walked to her car, got in, and left. Ray watched the Porsche pull out of the lot and onto the road. He stood there for a moment. Then he went back inside. Macy was at the office window, watching the car disappear down the street. "Was she nice?" she asked. Ray thought about it. "She was having a hard morning," he said. Macy accepted this and went back to her worksheet. Ray made 2 cups of tea, one for him, one for her, extra sweet the way she liked it, and set hers on the corner of the desk. He sat down across from her and looked at the pile of work orders waiting for him. The garage was not a big operation. It had never been. Ray had bought it from the previous owner 9 years ago with money he had saved over several years of working in other people's shops. He had repainted the sign himself, though he was the first to admit his handwriting was not ideal for signage. He had rebuilt the lift. He had replaced the wiring in the back office after a bad winter. It was his, all of it, including the debt, the long hours, and the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. He had not planned on doing it alone. But 4 years ago, life had rearranged itself without asking his permission, and he had made the adjustments required. He picked Macy up from school every day at 3. She did her homework in the back office. She knew the names of most of the tools. She had opinions about which suppliers had the best prices. She was 7, and already more organized than most adults he knew. That evening, after he had locked up and made Macy's dinner and helped her with the one worksheet she had not finished, Ray sat at the kitchen table and opened his phone. He did not see Vivienne Ashford's post that night. He saw it the next morning when a customer texted him a screenshot with no message attached, just the image, the caption, and below it the growing number of comments. He read it once. He put his phone face down on the workbench and went back to work. He told himself it did not matter, and in the way that some things do not matter precisely because they matter too much, he kept that thought close for the rest of the day and said nothing to anyone about it. Macy that afternoon brought him a drawing she had made at school, a garage, 2 stick figures, one tall, one small. Above the garage, in careful block letters that wobbled only slightly, she had written, "The best place." He taped it to the inside of the office window. It was still there, facing the parking lot when everything changed. The notification sound on Vivienne Ashford's phone was a soft chime. She had always found it elegant. By Friday morning, it had become something else entirely. She woke at 6:47 to the sound of her phone buzzing against the nightstand. Not once. Not in the way a phone buzzes when a friend responds to a message. It buzzed in the continuous, relentless way of something that has slipped loose and is now rolling downhill on its own. She picked it up. 11,000 notifications. She sat up. She stared at the screen. She read the first comment, then the second. Then she stopped reading individual comments and simply watched the number climb. The original post, the photo she had taken without much thought, the caption she had typed in under a minute, had been shared 218 times by people she had never heard of, in groups she had never joined, with commentary that ranged from disappointed to furious. Someone had identified the garage. Someone else had looked up the owner. A third person had found a local news story from 4 years earlier. A small item, not even a full article, just a paragraph in the community section, about Ray Dahlin and his daughter, who had moved into an apartment above the garage after a difficult year, and who had been described by the reporter as making it work, one day at a time. The comment that had split the post open, and let the air out of everything Vivienne had intended read as follows. That mechanic has been raising his daughter alone since she was 3 years old. He built that garage himself, but go ahead and post it for likes. Beneath it, 3,000 people had replied. Most of them were not replying to the original commenter. They were replying to Vivienne. She set the phone on the bed. She picked it up again. She read 3 more comments and set it down a second time. Her publicist called at 7:15. "I've seen it," Vivienne said before the woman could speak. "Okay, good. Then we skip the briefing and go straight to the response. You need something up by 9. I know. Short, sincere, no qualifiers. Don't say if anyone was offended. Don't say it wasn't my intention. Just say what you did, say it was wrong, say you're sorry. I know how to apologize." There was a pause on the other end. The pause was not agreement. "Draft something and send it to me first," her publicist said. Vivienne drafted the apology in 20 minutes. She read it back to herself. It sounded like the right words arranged in the right order. She sent it to her publicist, who made 2 small changes and cleared it. She posted it at 8:53. By noon, it had been shared 400 times. Most of the shares were accompanied by a single word, late, or not enough, or simply a screenshot of the original post placed beside the apology with no caption at all, allowing the contrast to speak for itself. In another part of the city, a journalist from a local television station had driven to Dahlon's Auto and Tire and knocked on the bay door. Ray opened it. The journalist explained who she was. She said she had seen the posts. She asked if he had a moment. Ray said he had until the next customer arrived, which was in about 40 minutes. They stood in the garage. The journalist held a recorder. Macy was somewhere in the back, audible in the way children are audible even when they are being quiet, a faint shuffle, a hum, the sound of a chair scraping across a floor. "How has this week been for you?" the journalist asked. Ray thought about it. "Busy," he said. "We had 3 brake jobs and a transmission issue which took most of Wednesday." "I meant the post, the social media attention." "I know what you meant." He was not unkind when he said it. He just wanted her to understand that he had answered the question he preferred. "I don't spend a lot of time on those things. I've got a business to run. People are very angry on your behalf." "I've noticed," he looked at his hands. "I don't need anybody to be angry for me. I just need my customers." The journalist asked a few more questions. Ray answered the ones that seemed useful and let the others go by. At one point, Macy came to the doorway of the back office, looked at the journalist with the frank curiosity of a 7-year-old, and then went back inside without comment. The journalist glanced toward the doorway. "Is that your daughter?" "Yes." "Has she seen any of the posts?" Ray looked at the journalist steadily. "She's 7, he said. She's doing her homework." The interview aired that evening. It was 4 minutes long. Ray spoke without drama, without performance, without the kind of visible pain that makes good television. He was simply a man standing in his garage talking about his work, with his daughter occasionally audible in the background, and a child's drawing visible through the office window, facing out toward the parking lot. The drawing became the image most people remembered from the clip. Vivienne watched the segment from her apartment. She watched it twice. She noticed the drawing in the window on the second viewing. She recognized from the angle of the shot that it was facing the lot where she had stood taking her photo. She sat with that for a while. Her phone kept chiming. She turned the volume off. Across the city, in a house that was very large and very quiet in the way that expensive houses often are, Gerald Ashford sat in his study and watched the same segment on the news channel his assistant had flagged for him. Gerald was 67 years old. He had built a financial services company over 4 decades that now employed several thousand people. He had been profiled in national magazines. He had donated to hospitals and universities. He had done, by most measures, a great many significant things. He watched the 4-minute segment twice. He did not call Vivienne. He looked at the name on the screen, Dahlin's Auto and Tire, Ray Dahlin. He sat with the name the way a person sits with a word they recognize, but cannot immediately place, turning it over, waiting for the part of memory that stores old things to come forward. And then it did. Gerald Ashford closed his eyes. He sat very still in his chair for a long time. Then he got up. He went to the kitchen. He poured a glass of water and drank it standing at the sink, looking out the window at the dark garden. His hands were not entirely steady. He went back to his desk. He looked up the address of Dahlin's Auto and Tire. He did not call anyone. He did not ask his assistant to arrange anything. He simply wrote the address on a piece of paper, folded it, and put it in the pocket of the jacket that was hanging on the back of his chair. Then he sat back down, turned off the television, and sat in the quiet for a long time. Gerald Ashford left his house on Saturday morning before 8 o'clock. He did not take the car his driver usually brought around. He took his own truck, a 2019 Ford pickup that he had bought because he had always driven trucks and saw no reason to stop simply because he could afford not to. Vivienne had found the truck embarrassing since the day he bought it. He had never cared even slightly. He drove alone. No assistant, no phone calls, no schedule. Just the address on the folded piece of paper in his coat pocket and 40 minutes of quiet road between him and the place he had seen on his television screen the night before. He had slept badly. Not because he was anxious, exactly, but because something he had carried for 11 years had shifted in the night, had moved from the place in his chest where he had learned to keep it and pressed closer to the surface, and he had not been able to push it back down. 11 years ago, Gerald Ashford had been driving alone on a February night on Route 9, the old 2-lane road that ran through the low hills east of the city. It had been raining earlier, and then the temperature had dropped, and the road had done what roads do in those conditions. He had come around a bend. The car had not done what he told it to do. He had gone through the guardrail. The drop was not steep, but the creek at the bottom was swollen from 2 days of rain, and when the car hit the water, it did not stop quickly. What Gerald remembered after that came in pieces. Cold water, the pressure of it against the door, the seat belt, the window that would not open, the weight of everything pressing inward. And then outside the glass a face. And then the glass breaking. Not shattering, breaking, methodically with something heavy, struck 3 times until it gave. And then a hand, an arm, the cold air, the bank of the creek, the sound of someone breathing hard beside him, not from fear but from effort. Gerald had been conscious for only part of it. He remembered the man's voice, calm, steady, saying words Gerald could not later recall but remembered as anchor sounds, something to hold onto while the world rearranged itself. He remembered the man handing his wallet to someone, the paramedics, arriving later, lights strobing through the trees, and saying, in a voice that carried, that the wallet belonged to the man on the bank and should go with him. Gerald had asked from the stretcher for the man's name. The answer came back through the dark and the noise and the cold. Ray. Just that, one name, and then the sound of someone leaving before the lights could find them. Gerald had spent 2 years looking. He had resources most people could not imagine, and none of them had been enough. Ray had not filed anything with the police. He had not spoken to the local papers. He had not, as far as Gerald could discover, told anyone at all. He had pulled a man out of a creek on a February night and gone home. Eventually, Gerald had accepted that he might never find him. He had made a donation in an unnamed man's honor to the County Emergency Response Fund. He had written, in a private document no one else had read, everything he remembered about that night and the man who had been there. And then he had kept living, the way people do, with the knowledge that the most important moment of his life had been witnessed by a stranger who had simply walked away. He pulled into the parking lot of Dahlon's Auto and Tire at 8:42 in the morning. The garage was open. The bay door was rolled up. Inside, he could hear the sound of metal on metal, someone working already on a Saturday morning. Gerald sat in his truck for a moment. The hand-painted sign above the door was exactly as it had looked on his television screen. The cracked lot was exactly as described. Through the office window, he could see a child's drawing taped to the glass, facing outward. 2 stick figures, a building between them, block letters that wobbled only slightly. He got out of the truck. The man who came to the bay door was Ray Dahlon. He was wiping his hands on a cloth. He was tall and calm, with the kind of eyes that took in information quietly and gave little back. He looked at Gerald, he looked at the truck, he waited. "I need an oil change," Gerald said. Ray looked at him for a moment. "We can do that, it'll be about an hour." "That's fine." Ray started toward the truck. He stopped. He looked at Gerald again, not at his face exactly, but with the particular attention of someone whose memory has just been touched by something. Gerald watched him. Ray said nothing for a moment. He looked at the truck. He looked at Gerald's hands. He looked at the line of his jaw and the set of his shoulders and something in the way he was standing, alone, in a parking lot on a Saturday morning without anyone around him. Gerald did not help him. He let him arrive at it. And then Ray arrived at it. He stood very still. The cloth in his hand stopped moving. "I figured," Ray said quietly, "that you'd find me eventually." Gerald's throat tightened. He had prepared in the general way for this moment. He had not prepared for the matter-of-factness of it. The way Ray said it without drama, without fanfare, as though he had simply been waiting for a thing he always expected, and now it had arrived, and that was that. "How long have you known?" Gerald asked. "About 2 days, when the news segment ran your daughter's last name." Ray looked at him steadily. "It's not a common name." "No," Gerald said, "it isn't." They stood in the parking lot. The morning was cool and clear. Somewhere inside the garage, a radio was playing something low and quiet. Gerald had thought over the years about what he would say if this moment ever came. He had thought about the words, the right ones. The ones that could carry what 11 years of trying to say something had built up into. He had thought about it for a long time. And in the end, what happened was this. Gerald Ashford, who had built a company from nothing, who had sat across tables from some of the most powerful people in the country and never flinched, stood in a cracked asphalt parking lot outside a hand-painted garage and cried. Not dramatically, not with any performance in it. Simply and completely, the way a person cries when something they have been carrying for 11 years is finally set down. Ray stood there and let him. He did not say anything. He did not step back. He simply waited with the particular patience of someone who understood that some things needed the space to arrive at their own pace. After a while, Gerald pressed the back of his hand to his face. He steadied himself. He looked at Ray. "I looked for you for 2 years," he said. "I know," Ray said. "I wasn't hiding. I just didn't." He paused. He chose the next words carefully. "I didn't think it needed to be anything more than what it was. You saved my life." Ray accepted this the way he accepted most things, directly, without deflection, but also without letting it become larger than it was. "It was a bad night," he said. "Glad you made it." "I have a daughter," Gerald said, "because I was alive to come home." Ray was quiet for a moment. From somewhere in the garage, there was the sound of small feet on concrete. Macy appeared in the bay doorway, backpack on one shoulder, looking at the man standing in her parking lot with the expression of someone conducting a reasonable assessment. "Dad," she said, "is he the one getting the oil change?" "Yes," Ray said. Macy looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at Macy. "Do you want water?" she asked. We have the good kind now, cold. Gerald looked at her for a moment. Something in his face shifted, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to one, something that came from a deeper place than ordinary warmth. Yes, he said, thank you. Macy went back inside. Ray watched her go, then he turned back to Gerald. She doesn't know any of this, Ray said. I know. She doesn't need to know most of it. I understand. Gerald looked at the garage. At the sign, at the drawing in the window. I'd like to talk to you, though, when you have time. Not today if today doesn't work, but I'd like to talk. Ray considered this. He looked at his hands. He looked at Gerald. Come back Monday, he said. I close at 5. We can sit in the back. Gerald nodded. He reached into his coat pocket. He held out the folded piece of paper with the address on it. The address he had written down 2 nights ago from the television screen. The address that had brought him here. Ray looked at it. He did not take it. You already know where I am, he said simply. Gerald put the paper back in his pocket. Ray walked to the truck and began the oil change. Gerald sat in the plastic chair near the office door. Macy brought him the cold water. She sat in her purple cushioned chair nearby and opened a book, a chapter book with a dragon on the cover, and read with the focused quiet of someone who had learned early that other people's business was generally their own. Gerald held the cup and looked at the drawing in the window. The block letters, the 2 stick figures, the building between them. The best place, it read. He sat in that parking lot for an hour while Ray Dolan changed his oil, and it was, without question, the best hour Gerald Ashford had spent in 11 years. The press conference was Gerald Ashford's idea, and it was entirely his own. He did not consult his communications team first. He did not run it past his board. He called his assistant on Sunday evening and said he needed a room, a podium, and reporters notified for 11 o'clock Monday morning, and when his assistant asked what the occasion was, Gerald said, something that should have been said a long time ago. His assistant, who had worked for him for 14 years and had learned to trust the tone of his voice more than the words, started making calls. Vivienne found out about it Monday morning at 9:15, when her phone rang and her father told her to be at the downtown conference room by 10:45. What's happening? She asked. I'll explain when you get there, he said. Come early, don't bring anyone. She arrived at 10:30. Her father was already there, standing near the window, looking out at the street below. He was wearing a suit she recognized, the gray one he wore for things that mattered to him, not business meetings, the other kind of things. Dad, she said, what is this? He turned. He looked at her in the particular way he had when she was a child and had done something he needed to address, not angry exactly, but settled in his concern, ready for the conversation to take however long it took. Sit down, he said. She sat, he told her. Not everything, not the creak, not the cold, not the window breaking or the hand that had come through the dark. He told her enough. He told her the name. He told her that the man she had photographed in his own parking lot and posted for strangers to comment on was the man who had, 11 years ago, ensured that Gerald Ashford came home. Vivienne listened. She did not speak for a long time after he finished. Then she said, You're going to say it today, publicly. Yes. In front of cameras. Yes. And Ray, she stopped. She tried again. He agreed to this. He asked me not to make it bigger than it needs to be, Gerald said. I told him I would be respectful of that. But there are things that need to be said, and I'm going to say them. Vivienne looked at her hands. She had spent the 4 days since the post exploded in a state she was not entirely comfortable naming. It was not the discomfort of bad publicity. She had navigated bad publicity before. It was something older and less manageable. The image of a 7-year-old holding a paper cup of water had stayed with her in a way she could not reason away. The sound of Macy's voice, matter of fact, unhurried, entirely without the performance that Vivienne herself had been trained from childhood to bring to every social exchange, had stayed with her. She had watched the news segment 7 times. She had not told anyone that. The reporters arrived, the room filled. Gerald stood at the podium and spoke for 11 minutes. He described Route 9. He described February. He described the car and the guardrail and the creek. He described what he remembered, the cold, the glass, the hand. He described 2 years of searching and the quiet that had followed when the search ran out of road. He described watching a 4-minute news segment on a Thursday evening and seeing the name Dahlin on a hand-painted sign and feeling something in his chest change position. He said, "The man my daughter's post brought national attention to is the man who made it possible for her to exist in the world at the level she does. Ray Dahlin pulled me out of a creek on a February night 11 years ago. He handed my wallet to the paramedics. He gave only his first name. And then he went home because that is the kind of man he is." The room was very quiet. "I have been a businessman for 40 years, Gerald said. I have made money and I have lost it and I have made it again, and I am not naive about the role that good timing and good fortune play in any life that looks like mine from the outside. But none of it was possible without what happened on that road. Ray Dahlin gave me my life back. My daughter grew up with a father because of him. Whatever I have built since that night has his name quietly written at the bottom of it, whether anyone knew it or not." He paused. He looked at Vivienne, who was in the second row and who was not moving. "We noticed," he said. "We see him. We are grateful." He stepped back from the podium. The questions came. Gerald answered the ones he chose to answer. He did not perform emotion, but neither did he suppress the occasional moment when it moved through him. When a reporter asked what he had said to Ray on Monday morning, and Gerald simply said, "What a person says when they are standing in front of the person who gave them everything and they have been waiting 11 years to say it." No one pressed further. Even journalists understand certain silences. Vivienne sat through all of it. She had not been asked to speak. No one was asking her for a reaction. The cameras were not on her. She was grateful for that in a way she could not have predicted. After the cameras were off and the reporters were filing out, Vivienne stood near the back of the room. She was not entirely sure what to do with her hands. Ray was near the exit. He had come, as agreed, quietly, without announcement, with Macy asleep against his shoulder, because it was past her usual afternoon hour, and she had the capacity to sleep anywhere when she was tired, which Vivienne found in that moment to be one of the most reasonable things she had ever encountered. Vivienne walked toward him. She had rehearsed something, words her publicist had not seen, that she had written herself at 2 in the morning 3 nights ago. Words that said what she thought she owed him, arranged into something she hoped sounded like sincerity rather than management. She got close enough to speak. Ray looked at her, not with coldness, not with the performed grace of someone who had decided in advance to forgive. Just with the level, quiet attention of someone who was listening. She opened her mouth. He spoke first, not loudly, not pointedly. "You gave Macy's water back," he said. "She noticed." That was all. He shifted his daughter against his shoulder and walked out. Vivienne stood in the empty room with the unrehearsed apology still somewhere in her throat, and nothing to do with it. The door swung closed behind him. She stood there for a long time. The paperwork for the partnership took 6 weeks, not because it was complicated, but because Ray Dahlin read every line of it, and when something was not to his understanding or not to his liking, he said so and waited until it was addressed before moving on. His lawyer was a woman named Diane Marsh, who had gone to the same high school as Ray and now worked at the county legal aid office. She billed him at a rate that was quietly far below market, which Ray acknowledged and she did not discuss. She was thorough, careful, and had the particular quality of being unamused by people who expected her to move faster because of whose name was on the other side of the table. Gerald's team had learned within the first meeting to bring everything in writing and to expect that every clause would be examined on its own terms. The agreement, when it was finally signed, had Ray's name at the top and Gerald's below it, not as a donation, not as a charity arrangement. As a business investment, with Ray retaining full ownership of Dahlon's Auto and Tire, full authority over daily operations, and the right to refuse any proposed change that he felt was not in the interest of the business or the people who worked in it. The investment was structured to fund an expansion of the garage, a second bay, a proper waiting area, and the infrastructure for a vocational training program that would offer free automotive skills courses to single parents in the county. The program would be affiliated with the garage, staffed partly by Ray and partly by instructors he chose, and would operate on a schedule designed around the reality of people who had children to pick up and dinners to make and lives that did not accommodate inconvenient hours. It was Ray's idea. Gerald had simply said yes. On the morning the construction crew arrived to begin the expansion, Macy stood in the parking lot in her school backpack and watched the equipment roll in with the expression of someone who had expected this and was mildly pleased that reality had cooperated. "Can we keep the sign?" she asked. Ray looked up at it, the hand-painted letters, the sun-bleached wood, the slight unevenness that had never bothered him. "Obviously," he said. Macy nodded. "Good, because I like it." She went to school. Ray went to work. The new waiting room took 3 weeks to build. It was not large, 5 chairs, a low table, a window that faced the parking lot. Ray painted it himself, choosing a color that Macy described as between green and not green, which turned out to be a shade of sage that looked, in the morning light, exactly right. The walls needed something. Macy had opinions about this. By the time the room was finished, the walls held 14 of her drawings. The garage, rendered in crayon. The 2 stick figures, one tall, one small. A car with a smile for a grill. A sun that was slightly too large for the sky but confident about its placement. Ray hung each one himself, with small nails and a level, because some things deserved to be straight. Vivienne Ashford showed up at the vocational program for the first time on a Saturday in October, 6 weeks after the partnership was announced. She did not call ahead. She did not post about it. She gave a name at the door that was not her own, not from any intention to deceive, but because the program staff did not need to know who she was, and she did not want it to matter. She had called the program coordinator and asked if volunteers were needed. The coordinator had said yes and given her a time, and that had been the whole of it. She was, by her own private assessment, not very good at it. She did not know much about cars. She did not naturally know how to speak to people who were exhausted and had come to learn something difficult on a weekend morning because they had no other window for it. She said the wrong thing twice in the first session and spent the drive home reviewing both incidents in detail. She came back the following Saturday, and the one after. She got better slowly, in the way that useful things are learned, not in moments of revelation, but in the accumulation of small corrections and the willingness to return after making them. Ray knew who she was. He said nothing. He was not, by nature, a person who made moments out of things that did not require it. Once in the hallway beside the new waiting room, they passed each other. She was carrying a binder of intake forms. He was carrying a wrench. She stopped. "Thank you for letting me be here," she said. He looked at her. "You're useful," he said. "That's what matters." He kept walking. She stood there with the binder and understood that she had been given something, not forgiveness, exactly, because that was not his to give or withhold for what she had done to a stranger in a parking lot. Something else. An accurate assessment. A place to stand while she figured out what came next. Gerald and Ray had lunch every couple of months. Not at restaurants Vivienne would have recognized from the outside. At a diner 3 blocks from the garage, or occasionally at the kitchen table in Ray's apartment above the shop, where Macy would drift in and out and sometimes sit at the end of the table and listen and sometimes disappear entirely to pursue more interesting business. Gerald always drove himself. He always brought the Ford. Ray always found something minor to check on it before Gerald left, a tire pressure, a fluid level, some small thing that required looking at. Whether it actually needed looking at was a question neither of them raised. They did not talk about the creek. They had said what needed saying in the parking lot on a Saturday morning, and had understood that nothing said after that would improve on it. They talked about Macy, who was reading chapter books now and had developed a strong opinion about which ones were worth her time. They talked about the expansion, and the program, and the couple who had come in the previous week. A woman with 2 kids, and a determination that had impressed Ray enough that he had stayed an hour past close to work with her. They talked about ordinary things, which was the least ordinary thing either of them had expected. One afternoon in November, Gerald arrived at the diner and found Ray already there, with Macy beside him in the booth, working on a drawing in the margin of a school newsletter. Gerald slid in across from them. He looked at the drawing. "What is it?" he asked. Macy looked up. She considered the drawing with the critical eye of an artist assessing her own work. "It's a garage," she said, "but bigger." "How much bigger?" She spread her hands to indicate a size that was ambitious. "This big, with more chairs in the waiting room, and a garden outside." "A garden for people to sit in while they wait," she said, as though this were obvious. "It's nicer than a parking lot." Gerald looked at Ray. Ray looked at Gerald. Neither of them said anything, but something passed between them, the particular understanding of 2 people who have, separately and together, arrived at the knowledge that the smallest things are often the ones that hold the most weight. The following spring there was a garden. It was not large. It was beside the parking lot, not instead of it, and it had 3 benches and a border of low plants that Macy chose herself from a catalog with the focus of someone making important decisions. Ray planted them with her on a Sunday morning, both of them on their knees in the dirt, following the spacing instructions on the back of each packet with the seriousness the task deserved. When they were done, Macy stepped back and looked at it. "It's good," she said. "It is," Ray agreed. She went inside to wash her hands. Ray stayed out for a moment, looking at the garden and then at the garage behind it and then at the sign above the door. The paint was starting to fade at one corner. He would need to touch it up before winter. He made a note of it and went back to work. A year after everything had happened, after the post and the comments and the press conference and the partnership and all the ordinary Saturdays that had accumulated since, a woman pulled into the parking lot in a hurry. She was on her phone when she got out. She did not look at the mechanic who walked out to meet her. She said what was wrong with her car. She asked how long it would take. When she was told, she exhaled in a way that said she did not have time for this and had not planned for it. From the waiting room, Macy Dahlin, 8 years old now, a year taller, still in possession of strong opinions, watched through the window. She got up. She went to the small table in the corner where the water cooler stood. She poured a paper cup of cold water. She carried it outside. The woman looked at her, looked at the cup. Macy said, "You can sit inside if you want. We have chairs." The woman took the water. She came inside and sat down. She looked at the walls, at the 14 drawings, the crayon garages and stick figures and the oversized sun. She looked without knowing why at one drawing in particular. 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing in front of a building. Block letters above it, slightly wobbling. "The best place." She sat in the chair and drank the water and waited, and something in her shoulders, which had been held up toward her ears since she got out of the car, came down a little. The mechanic outside worked steadily. The morning was clear. The garden was just beginning to show the first of the season's growth along the low border, green pushing up through the dark soil with the patient confidence of things that know they will arrive when the time is right. Ray finished the job in 68 minutes. He came in to give the woman her keys. She looked at the bill. She paid it. At the door she paused. She looked at the drawing on the wall, the block letters. "Your daughter draw these?" she asked. "Yes," Ray said. She nodded. She looked at the garden through the window. "Nice place," she said. And she left. Macy, from her chair in the corner, watched the car pull out onto the road. She picked up her pencil. She turned to a fresh page in her sketchbook. She began to draw.